Hello to everyone. We would like to welcome you to the presentation of our book, A New Principles of Economics, The Science of Markets, which appeared with Routledge last year.
In this introduction, we'd like to explain the ideas and objectives that led us to write this book and to choose its title, and also provide you with a short overview of its content.
It will be of interest for our Chinese audience that the book has been translated into Chinese and recently appeared as Xin Li with Truth and Wisdom Press. But before we start, let us briefly introduce ourselves. I am Carsten Hermann Pilat, Professor and Permanent Fellow at the Max Weber Center for Advanced Cultural and Social Studies, University of Erfurt, Germany. I'm an economist, philosopher, and sinologist, and have recently worked on ecological economics, the philosophy of economics, and Chinese economic culture. It has been my conviction throughout my academic career that economics as a discipline is in need of deep reform. Important parts of my scholarly work attempt to contribute to such a reform, most importantly, my Foundations of Economic Evolution that appeared in 2013.
I'm Christian Hederer, and currently a professor of economics and international economic policy at the Technical University of Applied Sciences in Wildau, Germany. My academic work is mainly placed in political economy, including its international dimension, and economic education. I'm strongly involved in teaching, covering a broad spectrum that reaches from introductory economics to advanced courses in international trade and investment law. This experience, together with 12 years of applied work as an economist and lawyer in public administration, has convinced me of the necessity of reform in economic curricula, building on a new approach that places much more emphasis on the role of institutions and the evolutionary character of economic systems.
Our title, A New Principles of Economics, deliberately harks back to economist Alfred Marshall's foundational treatise, which was first published in 1890 and became an important early textbook of the discipline. Marshall's book stands in the 19th century tradition of principles as comprehensive yet accessible introductions to different disciplines. It is rich in empirical examples and based on verbal analysis, while mathematics is relegated to footnotes. We follow that tradition, yet provide an account that is radically novel in many aspects. But why is such a new approach needed?
The first indication is the broad range of voices who have expressed discontent with economics, from students' initiatives demanding a pluralist curriculum reform to politicians who have understandably questioned the role of economics and economists in the run-up of the 2008 financial crisis.
There's no doubt that economics has developed considerably in the last 20 to 30 years. But this has often happened in a way that does not constructively align with other disciplines, such as in experimental and behavioral economics, and it has not changed its reference models whose assumptions remain deeply problematic, in particular so-called perfect competition and the self-interested rational agent in a purely individualistic conception.
Moreover, most of the new research is hardly, if at all, incorporated in mainstream textbooks. Some text boxes may be devoted to it, but those remain marginal vis-à-vis the thrust of the theoretical exposition, which has not changed in any fundamental way over the last decades. To all that, our book tries to offer a genuine alternative.
Let us introduce the main elements of our approach then. First, we deal with economics as a social science and firmly embed it into other sciences, both social and natural. Second, as a counterpart to this, we delineate economics against the other sciences by defining it as the science of markets. That is, referring to a material, real-world object rather than an abstract method or concept. With this, we again follow Marshall in a tradition which in fact reaches back much further, such as to Adam Smith or the treatise of price movements in the ancient Chinese Guanzi.
Third, we perceive economics as an evolutionary science, adhering to general structural principles that apply across different domains, including physics, biology, psychology, and human social networks. This also establishes economic phenomena as deeply historical and precludes a grand theory approach, which we propose to replace by medium-range theorizing. Fourth, we theoretically incorporate the fact that economics as a science can directly influence the behavior of the agents it observes. The key concept is performativity. Economics is a performative science in that it can co-create and constitute its objects, that is, markets.
And fifth, as a consequence of historicity and performativity, our exposition is verbal. We do not at all deny the important role of quantitative modeling and statistical analysis, but counter the notion that economic arguments can only count as scientific when they are formulated in mathematical terms.
Here is the structure of our book. 5 parts organized into a total of 18 chapters, each of which we will present in one lecture. The chapter structure roughly follows the conventional architecture of introductory economics textbooks, first establishing the foundations of the discipline and then moving from lower to higher levels of aggregation. However, we employ a very different micro-macro distinction. We do not refer to utility functions or aggregate demand functions. Rather, our micro perspective is constituted by a naturalistic approach to the economic agent, network structures, institutions, and their evolution. The macro perspective focuses on the role of money in the economy and the resulting aggregate dynamics. Overall, therefore, the book can be taken as an introduction to economics as we perceive it. Of course, you are invited to read the book chapters in parallel, but this is not necessary for following the lectures.
In part 1, we introduce economics as a scientific discipline. We introduce our object, markets, by presenting a real-life case, namely the evolution of Imperial China's market system over its long history. In Chapter 2, we discuss basic methodological premises of economics. We introduce markets as its object and discuss the performativity of economics as well as our approach to economic theorizing. In Chapter 3, we elaborate on one key consequence of the performativity of economics, namely the character of economics as a values-based science.
In part 2, we anchor economics in the life sciences. Chapter 4 discusses the relation between ecology and economy on the basis of a generalized evolutionary paradigm. Chapter 5 introduces specialisation and the division of labor as core concepts that bridge evolutionary theory and economics, conceiving of market-based specialization as a key feature of human niche construction. Chapter 6 presents an ecological view on production and introduces technology and technological evolution.
In part 3, we unfold the key elements of a newly conceived conceptual apparatus of economics. Chapter 7 starts with the economic agent. Chapter 8 explores social and economic agency based on the theory of social networks. Chapter 9 introduces institutions as foundations of markets, given their role for structuring agency beyond the dynamism and fluidity of networks. Chapter 10 is devoted to the core institution that separates markets from other institutional domains, namely money. Chapter 11 presents our theory of markets based on evolutionary thinking and the theoretical recognition of performativity.
In part 4, we cross the line to what is conventionally known as macroeconomics. In Chapter 12, we take a systemic look at monetary systems and finance, understood in a broad sense. Chapter 13 investigates one of the most conspicuous features of modern economies, namely economic fluctuations. Chapter 14 deals with global markets in the sense of a coexistence of various monetary domains embedded in a specific institutional framework and the consequences for international trade and investment. Chapter 15 tackles an issue of central concern for understanding the impact of markets on society, namely the inequality of market outcomes and its connection to societal power structures. Chapter 16 analyzes economic growth in the context of ecology, closing the loop to the second part.
Finally, in part 5, we focus on economic policy and the role played by economics as a science. Chapter 17 introduces an endogenous view of economic policy in which specific policy frameworks and decisions are outcomes of the policy process. Chapter 18 concludes by reflecting on the economist as advisor, given that, compared to other social scientists, economists play an important role in shaping modern politics, and their advice, if followed, potentially affects the lives of millions.
This concludes the introduction to our book on new principles of economics. We very much hope that you will join us for the following lectures, and we wish you a fascinating experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.